Live in a constant state of fear and misery. Who youngest me anymore? Live in a constant state of fear and misery. Do, live in a constant state of fear and misery. Who youngest me anymore?
Hello, everybody. So today is Thursday, July 18th, and we are bringing you Block Digest 184 at block height 585,949. So what is going on, Rick?
A lot, man. I mean, the temperature for one has just gone crazy through the roof. But, geez, it's like a lot of stuff going on with Libra. My goodness, it's like everybody's talking about that in DC. I could hardly believe how many people are talking about it. I was just going to sit down and watch a little bit of it, and I ended up watching multiple hours of congressmen and senators talk about Bitcoin and crypto in a way I never thought I'd hear. But, yeah, it's pretty interesting few days. How's things going with you this morning, Janine? Or this evening, sorry.
Well, I have yet to utter any kind of opinion about Libra, and I also am probably the only person who doesn't really care what congressmen say about Bitcoin, at least in terms of how relevant I think their opinion should be. So,
well, you're going to utter an opinion today, or we will sit in silence and refuse to move on.
Oh, no. How about you, Nopar? How's your day going, man?
Oh, I only care about congressmen speaking about Bitcoin if they are talking good things, because I don't care about the bad things. Anyway, yeah, I'm pretty good. It was a very productive decision to leave Twitter. Not productive enough, so I might leave some other platforms. But yeah, it's I'm getting back to coding much more than I was when I was on Twitter. How about you, Monkey?
Shinobi, how about you, man? What you been up to? Oh, well,
Nobody got the memo.
I just noticed. Yeah, what, you running from the kitchen? What's going on, man?
Well, I'm going to yell at Nopar if he keeps purging platforms, because how the fuck are we supposed to get a hold of you to coordinate for the show? You can't fucking do that.
You have a private platform that I only use for Block Digest, so you cannot complain.
Yes, I can, because you're spending too much damn time coding and not paying attention to it. Fuck, man. Speaking
of supposedly private platforms, I was surprised because I've never used Telegram before, and there was an instance where I thought I might have to, and so I tried to use it, and it's like, oh, it's another app that requires a phone number. What is wrong with you people? Like, how are all of you using Telegram with your phone numbers, or is that a recent requirement?
Nope, from day one.
Wow, that's
you are right.
I have never heard of that once, and so I was like, yeah, I might as well try it. And I was like, oh, nope, no thank you.
I lost my Telegram account like 2 or 3 times because I was traveling around and always opened the Telegram account with the phone number I had at the moment, so it's crazy.
Yeah, Telegram just seems to be the hardest one to keep up with, honestly. It's like in all these messaging platforms, that one, I don't know. I have it, but I don't really care much for it. So, yeah, what's going on with the all of the news, man? This is like saying, it's been crazy to hear. I know that not everybody cares about senators and congressmen and stuff, but everybody's got to care about Trump, right? He tweeted about Bitcoin. That was some big news, huh?
Yeah, so
okay, so that was like the best tweet, because now like, I'm sorry, but there are a bunch of Bitcoin people who are like fans of Trump. Like, not just like, oh, having him as the president
Do
might
not
be.
shit talk the God
Oh
Emperor.
no.
I mean, look, there are people who think that having Trump in terms of some game theoretical plan that they think will be enacted is a good thing, and then there are people who are actually fans of him. And now I just like, yeah, look, he hates, or he doesn't care about Bitcoin, and he thinks Bitcoin is a bad idea, and he's spreading
That means that
misinformation.
Bitcoin is a failure. God Emperor Trump is infallible.
I'm just saying it's like the perfect thing, because all these people are like, why don't you like Trump? It's like, he doesn't like Bitcoin. One of many reasons.
Alrighty though, but yeah, this I don't know, this whole first chunk of stuff dealing with Libra is a lot of things, and even though it's down in the show notes as two things, I think I'm gonna kind of plod through a little bit of it and then break, and we can talk. Otherwise, I'll probably be talking for like the next 40 minutes straight. But
All right, give us the breaks.
So I mean, obviously, first up is the Trump tweet, and like honestly, I don't really see why anybody would expect Trump to have a different attitude about Bitcoin. I mean, like he's had a lot of people in his administration who are open or friendly towards it, like especially Peter Thiel on the transition team when he first came into office. So like there are definitely a number of Bitcoin fans circling Trump. But I mean, like, just look at his comments on the economy and currency since he first announced his campaign. I mean, it's all been about manipulation, devaluation, and how that affects the import-export ratios and, the greater interaction with the global economy. And he's always been an American nationalist, America first, the dollar first, our economy first. And it's really silly in my mind, aside from the the not serious conspiracy theories about Trump trying to crash the economy to pump Bitcoin. Like this, he was never going to have any other view other than this. Like his entire worldview is just not compatible with a world where America does not have that kind of power and influence through the US dollar. Like he is an American nationalist. That's who he is. That's what he ran on. That's his entire attitude about operating this country. And so this was really the only outcome that was ever going to happen as far as what was Trump going to say if he mentioned Bitcoin. And it's really as simple as that in my mind. Like ultimately his opinion about Bitcoin doesn't matter. If it does, then Bitcoin has always been doomed to fail. But Trump isn't the only one who made comments about Bitcoin over the past week or so, as far as big influential members of the government. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has made a few testimonies regarding Libra that also touched loosely on Bitcoin and other aspects of the economy lately. And one thing that really, or rather two things that really kind of stuck out very largely in my mind as far as his comments were, one, pretty much him terrified of the U.S. government not raising the debt ceiling, which was reimposed on March 1st. And looking at the potential of America defaulting on its debt if this isn't handled by September, and the Treasury literally having to go through prioritization of debt payments and certain investments over others to continue being able to make servicing payments on our debt. But the other thing is he kind of just nonchalantly, in the context of one of the multiple hearings on Libra, spoke about Bitcoin becoming an actual, money, a means of exchange, a unit of account, and just nonchalantly said, like, yes, he could see a future where Bitcoin took off, And we saw the landscape in America change and kind of move back towards the era of national banking, where you had multiple different currencies circulating freely through the United States. And so, I think here in a sec is a good place to kind of talk for a minute about this, but I think it's just interesting to look at like the kind of polar opposite view you see with Trump's comments versus Jerome Powell's. I mean, like regarding Libra, Powell has been, harping on the money laundering and privacy concerns, but I just, you look at Trump saying like there is no way Bitcoin will ever succeed, like it's worthless, that the US dollar will reign supreme forever. And the head of the Federal Reserve Board just nonchalantly says like, yes, I can see a world where Bitcoin is used widely as a means of exchange. Like that would not be unusual or unthinkable. And it's just, those two completely polar opposite views in the government.
Well, I mean, like Trump's position, that's like the position he has to take, right? And it's not really Trump's position. I think he would say a different position if he wasn't the POTUS, like, the president of the United States, that carries some weight with your words. So you can't just go out there and speak your opinion on certain aspects. I'm sure that he really does love the dollar and believes in the dollar and everything, because, he kind of, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of Trump or anything like that, but I mean, for sure, I think he understands like some of the problems with the country and some of the problems with banking and all that. And I think he understands Bitcoin a little bit, to where I don't think he would really take this position unless he kind of had to. I mean, like I'm saying, with all these other senators and congressmen in these Libra hearings, man, it was really surprising to hear them talk about permissioned and, open public blockchains. And, I even heard one of them getting into like talking about GitHub and instances and branches. It was just like, when did these people start really educating themselves on what's going on here? And I'm sure Trump knows what's going on. It's just, he's in that seat where he can't take that position of being like, hey, Bitcoin is probably a good thing for markets, but he can't say that. But the Fed chair, I mean, like, he's sitting in a spot where, if they don't raise the debt ceiling, you start to see some real harsh realities pop into place with the dollar. And I mean, he's a lot more sober about it, I suppose.
But like that's what I find so interesting, though, Rick, is, that logic here, I think, applies way more to Jerome Powell. I mean, like, yeah, Trump is the president of the U.S., like the most powerful leader in the world. But like Jerome Powell is the head of the Federal Reserve. And I think like it's just shocking that the head of the Fed would make such a statement just off the cuff, nonchalantly, whereas the president is the one just kind of trying to paint this picture like, no, it's never going to happen. Where like ultimately, despite both being in very high places in the American, bureaucratic machine, like I'd say Powell is much more of a signal that's paid attention to in terms of comments on things like Bitcoin.
I mean, certainly people that are listening to information like, they're kind of digging through the trees in the forest to see like what real information to go after. But I mean, Jerome Powell is a relatively new Fed chair. I think if Janet Yellen said that, it would probably have more of an effect than Jerome Powell, just because people's association with Yellen in the Fed chair. Like, and Trump, he's just got, I mean, his damn name's Trump. He's got like a megaphone. Every time he says something, whole world hears it. So, I mean, like, yeah, I get what you're saying. It's like, Jerome should probably be holding the same position, or at least speaking that same position as the head of the Fed. But I mean, that's where it's like, yeah, we're in a different time right now. It's 2019, and there's like, politicians that understand Bitcoin, and, at a certain point, there's realities that has to get set in. And I mean, like, the Fed does run the dollar, and the dollar is, I mean, it's not in good place. I mean, like, as far as the market goes, it's good. But I mean, as far as like the US dollar's like, trust that's withheld by other countries, and thinking of what the dollar stands for and how it stands, I mean, that's not that strong. And I mean, like, they're probably preparing for some realities, and that's why they're speaking pretty soberly about all of this. And that's probably why you have somebody like Trump just being very vocal about, like the US dollar is supreme and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are virtual, whatever you want to call it, is all BS,
Yeah. I mean, this this week is just really, it's mind-boggling in terms of like what it's displaying regarding the attitude about these types of things in government, because you like it's all on full display. Like the Bitcoin is just never going to work. Like we can't let this work. Like there are people being open to it, even supportive of it, and everything in between. I mean, like even Libra, to touch a little bit before we move on to the next thing. You have some congressmen who are like a little hesitant to smash the hammer down on it. Like they're trying to actually be open to what benefits this can bring. And I mean, it's like, it's one, just an insane indication of just how big this space is getting as far as like interacting with the political system and the economy. But also it's just like, people talk about like the United States banning Bitcoin. Like, it's kind of popular to say just make it illegal and get it over with. But just look at the climate regarding this stuff in Congress. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, yeah, you have people in Congress who would want to do that, but you have people who would actively want to encourage it, or people on the fence and looking at things more neutrally. Like the entire atmosphere is just absolutely not conducive to outright banning these things or banning Bitcoin without a complete 180 in terms of attitude from a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, like, I really think the idea of this thing being an experiment anymore is kind of beyond that. I mean, it's just like, it really is something where, like you're saying, it's incredible to see this sort of large scope picture of, I mean, because, later on in the show, I'm doing a story on the IMF, and you hear the way they take on Libra and everything. And it's just like, yeah, there's definitely all these little takes in between where it's like some people want this thing to succeed or they want that thing to succeed. And, as far as the United States goes, I mean, like, yeah, there's definitely, a fracturing as far as what people think should be done correctly. I mean, if you look at states like California and New York, and you compare them to states like Texas and Wyoming, I mean, there's a stark difference in what they believe is okay, to implement on their citizens. And yeah, that's going to be something where when this decision time does come, I mean, we're talking about the base layer value system that people are transacting on. I mean, yeah, it could really, we've talked about this several times. I mean, it could fracture the states, people, picking their routes as to how exactly they're going to go with this thing. And, we might see some of these things take off in other areas of the world where, you wouldn't expect them to, or maybe you would. So it's definitely a weird position to be in as far as like coming from, you were 2014, I'm like 2015, and now we're here. It's just like, wow, totally different.
If Trump or any of those senators have a problem with Bitcoin, then luckily Bitcoin is open source, so they can go on GitHub and make a pull request, and then we can discuss if that's a stupid pull request or not.
Oh my god, that would be priceless. But yeah, it's like to kind of move on to the next thing. Just look at like how long Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies have existed, and we have not seen a bill passed to ban them or outlaw or even proposed. Whereas we've seen bills proposed to create like tax exemptions for using them for retail purchases. We've seen bills proposed to exempt tokens from securities regulations. Like I believe like that the original bill for that was actually just pushed back into Congress after it lapsed or something in the last few days. But nothing to ban it. But in the face of Libra, though, there is actually a discussion draft going around in Congress to explicitly ban any big platform utilities from being a financial institution or affiliated with a person that is a financial institution. And like this is, specifically a reaction to Libra and a private company trying to create its own currency. And like the language of this bill is pretty much like you're just not allowed to do anything regarding finance if you are a big tech company. And like they've defined this as pretty much anything over $25 million in revenue, or I'm sorry, $25 billion in revenue. Anything that's predominantly engaged in an online marketplace or platform. And they're pretty much just throwing everything in front of the CFTC, the SEC, the credit union, brain farts, the National Credit
FDIC?
Union Administration, and the Federal Reserve Board. And just saying like, these are the regulatory institutions in charge of deciding whether something is violating this. And this is just a completely banned activity now, with only a year, if this were to be passed, for any companies currently engaged in this kind of thing from just winding down. And, this is, it's, we've never seen something like this going after actual decentralized cryptocurrencies. But the second Facebook proposes this, like they're immediately throwing out drafts of legislation to ban companies from being involved in finance in any way, not just launching their own token, but just any financial services. And it's just, like I've said a couple of times when we talked about it, that it's just the perceived threat of Facebook doing something like this versus something like Bitcoin, where they can't actually do anything about it. And this legislation, I think, is just another demonstration that they, on some level, really do get they can't do anything about Bitcoin, because this kind of bill was never put out there for Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. But the second Facebook wants to launch a token, bam, this is here. And I think, it's not something that's going to affect Bitcoin directly in any way, but I really don't like a bill like this in response to Libra. As much as I, think this is the inevitable reaction, as much as I don't want to see something like Libra go forward, like this kind of bill isn't just preventing Facebook from launching Libra. Like this would prevent Facebook from building any kind of financial service, including integrating Bitcoin or another actual cryptocurrency into their platform. And I think that's incredibly damaging, because it's not only saying that these companies can't just make their own currency, it's you can't interact with any currency. And I believe, honestly, like Facebook has their current Facebook Pay feature, or whatever it's called. Like if this were to pass, they would have a year to wind that down. And I mean, I think it's silly, because this isn't just stopping a company from making its own currency. It's a company, or preventing a company from working on Bitcoin or integrating Bitcoin. It's preventing a company from just having traditional fiat payment services. And I think this is just an insane overreaction to Libra. And it's, like I said, not going to directly have any kind of serious effect on Bitcoin, but on the fringes, it very well will.
Yeah, I wonder what they would label as a big tech platform. I mean, like, would they consider Gab that, or, just like some of these up and coming, that's where I would see it as like, yeah, if you draft some sort of legislation like this and make it a law, then, it could lead to some troubles down the line. But I mean, I don't know, man. I'm just thinking about this, and it's like, I mean, like, don't you think that some antitrust laws should have already been brought up against these companies? Or like, if you're going to do something about big tech platforms, like it should be through that antitrust route. And like, if they're not going that route, then why?
Well, that's kind of my point, is like, ideally governments wouldn't be doing any of this shit, but they're here and they are. And instead of making very specific targeted actions, like this kind of broad sweeping motion is what they're going with. And it's like this isn't just going to stop Libra from launching. Like I said, like this is preventing all of the major tech platforms out there from again, if this were to pass, from integrating or working with any kind of existing cryptocurrency. Like that, it's horrible, because it's, as much as everybody out there in this space wants everything to be perfectly decentralized, perfectly like, self-custodied, it's like that's not what's going to happen. Like that's not where the real world is going to take things. Like people are going to deal with custodied services. They're going to deal with things built on top that are not perfectly decentralized. And, a bill like this would prevent all of the tech companies out there best positioned to offer those kind of services from doing so. It's really just a stupid move. Especially, sorry, go ahead, Rick.
No, I was just going to say, is this all out of California again, or is it New York?
I don't recall who actually pushed the draft of this bill forward, but it's this kind of thing is exactly what will prevent innovation from happening in America, which is, one of the things that they've been harping on all week is they don't want to let Facebook do this because of all of these concerns, but they don't want to just stifle all innovation. But, that's exactly what this bill would do, even around the fringes of things that these companies don't even have any direct control over.
Yeah, now's the time to be pretty vigilant. We need to see where this bill sort of crops up in like what jurisdiction, and make sure that people counter this, because I mean, for sure, there's like a move. I mean, like if there's anything about this Libra launch that has like been noteworthy, I think it's just complete like the reaction from everyone, and like that's almost just like, I don't know, like why they would do this unless, I mean, they had to have known they were going to get a big reaction. And they're like, I mean, if you listen to those hearings where the Marcus guy was saying, like, look, we have no intention of leaving the United States. We're going to sit around here until you guys give us regulatory approval. And we have at the same time, like, just last month, the FATF passing down these guidelines. And, there's a lot of like this, what's going to do with the travel rule. And like we're saying with, just basically the whole market in general, like where it's all sort of getting pushed into this corner. I mean, where it goes from here is really kind of up in the air. And if like this sort of draft legislation pop up in your jurisdiction, you better make sure you call out the people to push that back on that, because like we're saying, this whole thing could fracture the states. And I mean, if you're somewhere that you love your home area and all of a sudden this stuff starts getting pushed down, I mean, you might have to move out of there, or, I mean, you're going to have to fight back.
Mm-hmm. And, I guess move on to the last big chunk is the actual hearing yesterday and the day before. I mean, this hearing on display is pretty much every single thing I said was going to happen in terms of government response. Like that this would not be purely limited to just Libra and issues solely with Libra. I mean, like this is draining or drawing a lot of criticism about everything Facebook has ever done that people in government are not happy with. I mean, Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio, he was like, he just went off. I'm sorry, not a senator, a representative from the House of Reps, but like he was the first person to make a comment after the chairman opened the hearing, and he just laid into them. Like, why should we trust you? Like you have multiple times misused and mishandled people's private information, continued doing so after regulators stepped in, fined you, like slapped you with orders to respond to this. And then even brought up when Facebook has literally used their users for scientific experiments to see whether they can manipulate people's moods psychologically by manipulating what they see in their feed. And I mean, like all of these things that Mr. Brown was bringing up in terms of, criticism of Facebook, like none of this had to do directly with Libra or the consequences of Libra or how Libra will work. Everything right off the bat was just all of the past things that have nothing to do with financial activity that have just completely marred Facebook's reputation. And I mean, it's like, Libra is just the cherry on top. Like a lot of these congressmen are out for blood when it comes to Facebook. And it's by no means just because of Libra.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, I'm just thinking, like, in our world, right? Like, one of like the biggest damning things against Ethereum is like Vitalik picking his nose and putting it on the wall. I mean, like, it's kind of crazy, but I mean, like, whenever you're talking about a value system that you're transacting on, I mean, like, you're going to hold those people to an ultra level of scrutiny. And I mean, like, legitimately, the thing with Cambridge Analytica and, like they're saying, I mean, they just have a terrible history. And I mean, like, you're right. I mean, they're not talking about the Libra, but it's like, this is where it's like this whole thing is about whether or not they're going to allow the Libra.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of the concerns specifically with Libra that aren't like the kind of unloading everything else I'm talking about, from the government's perspective are very serious concerns. Like, obviously the big one is KYC and AML. And, Facebook is claiming that they're going to address this by building the KYC and AML features into their Calibra wallet that Facebook directly is going to be developing and offering, and continuing to focus on this, having to ID yourself to sign up through this wallet to actually onboard through Facebook. But, if this is an open system, well, there are other wallets out there, and you can't guarantee that every wallet interacting with the system is going to have these same requirements. And like the Facebook representative was very dodgy when congressmen started asking questions about OFAC and the network actually processing transactions. And every time this question, because it was brought up multiple times, was directed at him, he kept kind of trying to just sidestep it and bring up the fact that, the foundation doesn't actually operate anything. The individual members do. Or our wallet that Facebook is offering is going to be KYCing people. And, frankly, as much as I think these regulations are horseshit, like the government doesn't agree with me. And Facebook did a horrible job of assuaging their concerns over these things, because he just kept dodging the question when they kept trying to narrow it not to Facebook's wallet, which is one out of many, but the actual network itself processing these transactions. And, I really don't think at all. There's really two things I can see Facebook's kind of coming from in that regard. Is they've either not really thought about this at all in terms of compliance, or they're going to try to just kind of skirt this as much as possible and selectively offload the liability for things like that onto individual node operators or association members, as opposed to that being a collective responsibility of the association. And there's no way Congress is going to let them do that. And, another big issue was the Calibra wallet and how that would really be handled with Facebook. Like whether Facebook would create barriers to other wallets integrating or being embedded in Facebook applications for use, or whether Facebook would have special incentives to use their Calibra wallet over any other third-party wallet when interacting with the Facebook ecosystem. And again, like the representative kept trying to kind of dodge this and say that he just pretty much kept repeating like this is an open network and anybody can build a wallet, when the core of the question coming from these congressmen wasn't about the network. It was about the Facebook platform itself and whether it would try to distort things to push people into using Facebook's wallet specifically. And again, the congressman continued trying to dodge things. And, you know, as far as the association itself, another big concern brought up was what happens from the gains or interest from the assets and currencies that would be held in the basket backing this, because you're going to be accruing interest on that money. Like any kind of other investments, bonds, stocks, equities, is going to be realizing gains. And what's going to happen with that money? Because the Libra Association is registered as a non-profit. But there is really no way, unless you go out of your way into an abnormal financial product to back things, to hold those assets without accruing profit. And so what's going to happen with that profit? Where is it going to go? How is it going to be split up? And is that in complete contradiction with the Libra Association registering as a nonprofit? And so it's like there's just all kinds of ways in which Facebook is just trying to zigzag through these regulations. And it's kind of just like, what the fuck are you thinking? Like this isn't something bootstrapped from scratch or decentralized or beyond your control. Like there is very clearly designed and delineated people in control of this system if it's actually built and launched. And it's like they think just dodging these questions and having these catchphrases is just going to somehow make Congress think that isn't the case. And it's just, it's absurd.
Yeah, I know you're talking about Mr. Marcus dodging all these questions. That guy, yeah, he looks like a real, somebody that's built to dodge these kind of things. I mean, I don't think Facebook thinks they are obligated to fulfill, regulations or laws or whatever goes on in DC. They don't. I mean, I'm just thinking about the way that they're, like you're talking about. I mean, it's the one wallet thing, but there was another Congressman, Riggleman, and Boogers brought it up in the chat, talking about how the Congressman was saying, like, look, there's only one developer and he's a Nigerian guy. You are using the Rust language. Like, how do people actually get their merge in? And, they were talking about their process, and, it's like only this one avenue as far as upgrading the code as well. And I mean, like, there's just, like we're just saying, as far as like big tech companies and the way that DC sees big tech companies, like us, they're all kind of labeled this big tech companies, right? And I'm sure the tech companies have a similar label for all these government officials in DC. And I mean, like, we've seen this in other tech companies with, Twitter and the way that they handle free speech rights, and Google, the way that they're handling military contracts between China and the United States. I mean, it's really hard to look at these companies and say that they even feel an obligation to, obey the law.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of, the general theme going on here right now. Like these companies are starting to just more and more try to pretty much go up to the government and go fuck yourself. And like that's not gonna work. The government has all the guns. They're the ones with the air quote authority to throw you in jail. They're the ones that the vast majority of people in this situation are going to look at as the legitimate authority in a conflict like this. So it's just like, what the fuck are you thinking here? Like you're not gonna win trying to go up against a government like this. So why are you trying? Like, it's this is what's gonna happen. Like most of the contempt over this project isn't just this project. It's you as a company and what you have historically done in everything. And it's like this kind of headbutting with them is just like you're just asking to get kicked in the face.
Yeah, to say that this next year, whenever we see the 2020 elections coming up and the platforms being used for information exchange to try and, inform voters, and like we see tech butting heads again with government officials. I mean, it's really hard to say that they don't see something coming. But I mean, like, also, it's like, these guys are not really geographically pinned down. That's, I mean, like maybe that's their ace in the hole. It's like, hey, if you guys do want to put us down, well, then we're going to move to Russia or Malta or the Dominican Republic. I mean, you just pick a place, right? Like, I mean, we'll just go set up shop over there. We'll bring our user base, we'll keep everything with the technology, but now it's like you're no longer involved in the actual data mining process. Because, I mean, I imagine they're taking some profits through fines and stuff like that too. But I mean, like the real money in all this is the data itself. And I mean, like, I guess they feel like they can just totally run away with that stuff and not really have to worry about. I mean, it's like you're saying, the theme of it, it's like all coming to a head, and where it goes, it's hard to say, but geez Louise, it's hard to look at 2020, not like a corner, and we're going to, get squished in a bunch of different directions.
Mm-hmm. It's like this hearing ultimately is, I'm just absolutely more confident than ever this is just not happening. Like, this is not going to launch. The U.S. government is not going to let this happen. Like, period. And it's odd. Like, I'm just shocked at the number of people in this space who thought that it actually would. So it's like, what world are you living in?
Well, the ANCAP world of censorship resistance. I swear. I mean, like a lot of this stuff is still kind of ill-defined, and people still kind of run with different words, and even in our space, it's like, what exactly do you mean by this or that? And next thing you know, we're running down a rabbit hole arguing with each other. I don't know if that's, like we're saying, we got to kind of get the troops together in case they try to enact some sort of crazy laws,
Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Nopar, Janine, guys have any input before we move along, I guess?
I mean, my only thing is I found it extremely funny that for the period of time that I briefly watched the hearing, there was a question about whether Facebook or Calibra or whatever the organization is that runs this thing is going to take on the functions of a bank or act like a central bank. And I believe David said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not even trying to compete with bank deposits and stuff like that. And then I think it was an hour or two after the hearing, there was a Wall Street Journal article that was saying like, oh yeah, they're going to basically take on the functions of a central bank. And it's like, I didn't read the article. I just thought it was hilarious that like you literally just can't trust anything these people say, because as one of the congressmen pointed out, because I think he even kind of did some self-criticism where he said that there was a lot of amnesia in Congress about the number of times that Facebook has lied about things that it has done or hasn't done over the years, and so you can't trust a single thing they say about what they're planning to do.
Mm-hmm.
We are gonna be build back doors, side doors, and front doors. Whatever you want, just let me build this thing.
Oh man, I think you're right. I mean, like they definitely, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, another thing I remember is I don't remember what the question was, but David said that law enforcement would have like very easy access to Libra transactions and who's making transactions, and so that kind of defeats the whole promise of it being privacy preserving or whatever. Like again, like don't trust anything to do with Facebook to actually preserve your privacy. But it's just weird that all of these promises are getting broken so early before the thing has even been coded or launched, or if it even gets launched. It's just weird. So many things are already being backtracked.
They are going back to the traditional problems of, we are building money, but it should be private, but, it wouldn't be good if terrorists and pedophiles would use it. So, let's be transparent towards my company, and then let's give us access to law enforcement too, so they can see everything too. But wait, that's not good, because what if there is just one corrupt cop that puts out everyone's financial information on the internet? So how should we really build this thing? They are getting back to these very fundamental problems that we already realized. Well, okay, let's build it in a private way, because that's the only way how money can work.
Oh, you think that's the issue, Nopara? Is just dumping stuff on the internet? I want to see your reaction when you realize that there are corrupt police all over the place who will specifically look up individuals' private information to hand to the criminal organizations they're in the pocket of. That's always fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's going on for sure. And it's just like the comedy of all this stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, did you hear like how many times this was all like, oh, well, Libra is all about this altruistic cause of banking the unbanked. I think that was like the funniest, just to hear them try and push that. And yeah, it's just like, okay, right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's a charade. This whole thing is a charade. But I don't know. You want to take us into the next one, Rick? I think we've we actually did just spend 45 minutes straight talking about this. Hello.
Oh shoot! I didn't unmute myself. But yeah, let's we'll get back to the subject here in a little bit. We're going to take a little turn here, get into something different. So it looks like the Bitcoin price has been blowing up lately, but there's one little country where it blew up a little bit extra. I'm talking about Zimbabwe, where we've recently seen premiums for Bitcoin running into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. This has got a lot to do with a couple of major developments there. Just last month, the president of Zimbabwe banned the use of foreign currencies for settlement of local transactions, including US dollars, as well as reintroducing the Zimbabwe dollar after being non-existent for over a decade. So we are seeing reports of local Bitcoin traders asking for over $100,000 for over-the-counter Bitcoin, one trader asking for over $300,000. And it has to be over the counter because last May, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe also banned local banks from processing transactions involving Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. But this still hasn't had much effect on the area, as far as keeping Bitcoin out of the country. There's a lot of tech savvy people there. If you're surprised about that, they're there. And in fact, the small country is one of Africa's most active areas right now in trading. So it looks like most people are turning to Bitcoin to not just hedge against economic uncertainty, but also now for settlement of transactions. So, how exactly that's all going about right now, it's still just sort of a developing story, and so we'll follow along with it and see how it builds out. But it's definitely some interesting developments to see, like a country be so bold as to just say, well, we're not going to allow the US dollar in here anymore. Because that's something that just certainly would have been unthinkable. I mean, like, I want to say just 10 years ago. I mean, like, not even that long ago, not even 10. I mean, it seems like like we're saying, with all this information about these new currencies and new government regulations, the way that all's going, I mean, yeah, it's, I don't know. We are far away from where we started. And, these guys are just like running with it over there in Zimbabwe. And now we're looking at 6-figure Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely countries out there that are going to want to take advantage of Bitcoin and really position themselves to gain a lot from it. But, most countries are not really going to want to do that until they're up against the wall, and that's their only option. I mean, like, a country is going to want to maintain their monetary sovereignty and their control over their currency, because when you start removing, I mean, it's like, that's just the linchpin of modern day nation states in terms of actually enacting things. You can't fund that or really try to steer the economy without that control. And they're going to fight to maintain that in the vast majority of cases. I mean, it's just the same type of dynamic in any kind of market or anything. Like, that small group that tries to push something forward or take those risks. And you know, I was trying not to do this, but I gotta like kind of point back to Libra a little bit. Like, why do you think that countries, these developing nations, would welcome with open arms something like Libra when Bitcoin isn't even, you know, really kind of creating that type of reaction? When that means they lose so much control over their own country's economy. Like that's just not how people are going to look at this, how governments are going to look at this.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I mean, I heard, like, I don't want to go back to it either, but that hearing, you know, they were talking about like, well, we might be moving back to an era of national banking and regional currencies, and you know, the way that banking used to be. And I mean, that's, yeah, I mean, it's hard to look at this sort of story and not think that, you know, like, people are starting to understand that their monetary policy of the region is like, it's a very powerful thing, and it's something that you should be in control of. And yeah, that's where I worry about some of these nations that are really small, and you know, they just sort of, they're kind of rife for a big company like Facebook to sort of just run in there and try and you know, push what they're selling. And you know, I'm sure there'll be a small group of individuals in those regions that will think they can help control the Libra beast and you know, use it to their advantage, and you know, try and wield it against their population. But for sure, things are getting shooken up in the idea of settlement currencies and what people are doing with those and how exactly they're getting used. I mean, like we've seen earlier this year, the, you know, people in, I guess that was the Senate, one senator so bluntly saying like how the US dollar is one of the most powerful weapons we have. And you know, these things, they weren't talked about not too long ago. So there's, people are starting to wake up to this, and you know, things are going to change for sure. And I don't know, Zimbabwe looks like they're making moves quick. I'm sure Venezuela is doing that. And you guys got any more comment on this? I got one more country we can get into.
Yeah, I mean, if you take what people, you know, make payments with or store their wealth in, and you just try to destroy the value there, like they're gonna look for something where that's not happening. It's like water seeking a level.
That's a good way to put it, man. And that water is finding a level. Like we got another update out of Iran. Last we spoke about the country, it was to cover the topic of more mining farms being shut down and seized. Well, it looks like miners are about to get some relief. The governor of the Central Bank of Iran announced plans to legalize cryptocurrency mining, despite the fact that there's no rule allowing legal trade of said cryptocurrencies. Abdul Nasser Hamati said, quote, mining of the international digital currencies should be done based on the price of electricity for export. And what's more important is that these mined currencies should be fed back to the national economic cycle, close quote. So it looks like Iran is really waking up to the idea of cryptocurrencies helping outmaneuver US sanctions, and they want to keep encouraging that growth. The only thing with this legalization comes different pricing, like he just said about the cost of electricity for export. So there will probably still be some subset mining contracts, but it sounds like without a contract, you'll be paying the export price of electricity to mine, which that would be somewhere between 7 and 10 cents. So I think Iran is in a good place, and they're still ironing out the kinks in their ecosystem over there. I'm sure after this law goes into effect and we stop seeing the mining seizures, then we'll start to see an average cost of mining develop. But as far as like finding a level, you know, and using that, I mean, like the mining ecosystem over there and what Iran's been doing with, you know, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, I mean, like they're, you know, another one of these countries that's just sort of ahead of the curve because they were put in a pinch. And, you know, it's, I mean, it's one of those things where as like a Bitcoiner, I'm excited to see this, that these people can stand up for themselves, because whenever I see a nation, I never really think that it's a nation of people with one belief. There's a nation of individuals, and those individuals get put into hard times, and it's good that they have something like this to help them through it. And, yeah, I mean, it's This is just like, it's absolutely crazy that we can spend over an hour now, like, or close to an hour now. We can certainly continue to go like over an hour about geopolitics and Bitcoin and how this thing is absolutely becoming a Leviathan, and it's taken over.
Yeah. I mean, that's, really probably the best move for Iran. This is kind of taking it to a place where they're not just completely trying to kill the entire industry in the country, but like we saw last time, you went over this, like they were seeing double-digit percentage growth in electricity consumption in some areas, and that's just not sustainable. So like here, they've kind of created that two-tier structure where people just rushing in without planning and deal making, like you're gonna get hit with like something that's not even close to the most competitive electricity rate for mining, but you can try to establish deals for better prices. So there's like something to kind of stop the huge horde from rushing in, but at the same time, give the government the ability to kind of select how much can actually come in a profitable way where they'll want to stay there. So it's kind of a little bit of a disincentive that they can fine tune on an individual case. And it's, I guess it's better than nothing. Like they're trying to, keep that business there and benefit from it, but they needed something to stop all of that from just exploding in terms of drain on their grid.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, like you're saying, I mean, as far as these implementations, there's not many to look at. I mean, it's certainly better than the Petro and the way that they're trying to implement something there. I mean, as far as just like pushing it through, ramming it through with a few individuals and everything, where it does seem like Iran's just being a lot more, slow growth development, let it sort of, pick up a market and, figure out what to do with it from there. And, I mean, Venezuela, well, I mean, they're kind of more in a pinch. So maybe they feel more of an urgency to do that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, I think that this is a good move for Iran. And I mean, probably a good move for Zimbabwe. And, I mean, as bad as it is in Venezuela, I mean, at least people are sort of figuring out this different system on a certain level, whether it's the Petro is something they'll use or they figure it's something that's bad. But yeah, this is all really good across the board as far as adoption and people just coming to understand what it is that Bitcoin's doing, and and it's doing it, and that's why they're trying to encourage it and trying to use it in some sort of way to help themselves.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, are we ready for something really fucking funny?
Yeah, I saw this on the desk. What is this, man?
Okay, this is really exciting for me, partially because I finally get to use something I made on the testnet clip for this. So I get to have fun editing stuff. But yeah. So obviously everybody knows by now that Ethereum is planning on totally rebooting everything to Ethereum 2.0 at some point in the future that keeps sliding further and further out the more time goes on. But in the meantime, they're going to try to come up with a stopgap solution until they get there. So Ethereum 2.0 is trying to hit 10 megabytes a second in terms of data throughput. And it's never going to happen. But until they get to the point that's never going to happen, Vitalik is proposing to use other blockchains as a place to store all of the massive amounts of data that the Ethereum Rube Goldberg machine generates. And this is just like the level of nonsense stupidity is amazing. Because in order to really do this, you have Ethereum dumping data onto another chain. Okay, so when Ethereum references that data, you have to actually validate that the other chain, like the Ethereum chain, has to validate that other chain in order to actually guarantee that the data it's referencing on that other chain is valid. And so what Vitalik wants to do is create an absurd Rube Goldberg machine where Ethereum on chain or on the Ethereum chain attempts to incentivize people to go over to the Bcash chain and just dump this data onto Bcash so that when it's needed by the Ethereum chain can actually grab the headers from the Bcash blockchain and validate them through a contract on the Ethereum chain to then just be able to go give me this data from Bcash from a Bcash node and effectively just start using Bitcoin Cash as an extension of Ethereum so that Ethereum contracts can just kind of do the core operations on the Ethereum chain, but dump all of the data and read all of the complex data they need off of the Bcash chain. And this is not a joke. This is not a parody. Vitalik is actually saying this. He's literally saying, like, Ethereum doesn't scale, so let's start dumping all of the data that can't fit on Ethereum because it doesn't scale onto Bcash because nobody's using it. And let's just ignore the fact that Bcash doesn't scale either. And the most priceless thing about all of this is in the comments of this post that Vitalik put out. There are people from shitcoins just going, use our shitcoin, use our shitcoin. Like there's literally somebody claiming to be a developer from the Steemit team telling Vitalik Steemit should use this, and that Steemit is actually considering forking Steemit to help make this work. Like there are Dash people saying that Dash is a good thing for this because we're going to keep the fees cheap by raising the block size, and the master nodes can enforce like instant zero confirmation in a safe way. There is literally this guy in these comment sections talking about this shitcoin Flow that I've never heard of, that is a Litecoin fork from 2013 with a proof of work change that has the same thing Bcash has right now, where you can only reorg like so many blocks back, that's specifically made for just storing random data on, that they claim the Wyoming land records are stored on. Like, you cannot make this shit up.
Wow. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I can't believe Steemit would do that, because wasn't it just a couple of months ago that Steemit was like freaking out because no one was running nodes and it was not working, and because too many people were storing data on it and not running nodes. Like, I don't think you're a great candidate, buddy.
But it's just like this is the second most valuable cryptocurrency in the world. It's like half as old as Bitcoin. And it's literally at the point now where it's like, this doesn't scale, so let's just start dumping data on another shitcoin that doesn't scale to try to pretend like we have a plan and this is going to continue working. And then eventually the magic unicorn solution that keeps getting pushed further and further out into the future finally comes along. We can just stop doing all of this crazy, insane nonsense.
Oh man, yeah, that is a joke, dude. Yeah, like, okay, we'll scale by using other non-scalable networks, and we'll just recall the information that way. I mean, it is getting to be really, really rough. I mean, like, I know a lot of these developers around here, and for sure, I've seen a few projects now just sort of like drop by the wayside where lost funding, no longer using Ethereum, trying to turn it into a business. And it's like, it's just evident that there is definitely major troubles over there when it comes to scaling and what exactly they're trying to do. And they don't know the next step. And like you're saying, I mean, ETH 2.0 was supposed to be here at the end of February, and now it's scheduled for next year. And I mean, yeah, Dash, Steemit, Bcash all rolled into the Ethereum bundle. And, here in a couple of years, we're going to see, just a fork of all those into one coin or something. Who knows? I mean, like, for sure, it's just like become a running joke at this point to where, I mean, legitimately, I feel kind of bad for, people that are running with this Ethereum cruise saying like, oh, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do this. And it's just like, guys, let's reel back the expectations still, because that still goes on. I mean, like there was 23 people at the blockchain meetup last night, and I'm quite sure that over half of them were new. And I know that there's at least 3 or 4 projects that are still trying to get off the ground with this stuff. And that's where I feel sorry for some of these people.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I don't bother like seeking people out to explain to them why I think this is going to be a failed project, because I feel like it's a waste of time. Like, just let them run their course. They'll realize it eventually, even if they realize it after it's too late. And I don't know how, like, there's so many awful people involved in that project that, like, if this goes down, I would be happy to see it go down just to see them lose all of the influence that they gained because of this thing getting undeserved popularity. But then there's a bunch of people who, I don't know, they're interested in the technology and whatever. It's like, that's okay, but it's all going to be wasted in a few years. Like, there's either going to be something new that pops up that gets shilled into popularity or whatever, but I don't see this thing being useful for much longer. If like if you're at the point where you're having to store data on another blockchain that also was once claiming to be super popular because it was a fork, and now it's basically dead and it barely gets over a couple 100 kilobytes per block. Like, really, like, there's a reason that the blocks are so small and there's a lot of block space on Bcash. It's because no one wants to use it. Like, it's that simple. It's not because they're doing a better job. It's just because it's empty because no one's there. So that's not a solution, and the fact that that's being considered is really a red flag.
Mm-hmm. And this is why you need block size restrictions, because if that space stays effectively free, there will be effectively infinite demand for it, and that doesn't work. But
Gigamegs, dude, gigamegs.
All right, Nopar, you want to take us through this latest Chainalysis webinar?
Yeah, sure. Just one more comment here is that Ethereum is a typical junior developer project. Junior developers don't yet know that if they build something quick, then they have to maintain it. And then they have to eat the shit that every time they touch something, it's going to be a little bit worse, a little bit more complicated, and the complexity just makes the whole project collapse. Now that's what we are witnessing right now.
Okay, but what about the Chainalysis webinar?
The Chainalysis webinar was quite interesting. It was about the Darknet markets. The speaker this time was Hannah Curtis, not Kim, like last time and every other times. And in the beginning, there was some information on the company that I found interesting. They have 180 plus customers over 40 countries, and they actually listed some exchanges those are using them. So it's BitPay, Bitstamp, Binance, and Corebit. This is what they listed. So yeah, just keep that in mind, guys. All right, so darknet markets. The most prominent goods were drugs and mainly marijuana. No surprise there. there were some trends. What are the darknet market trends? One thing is that Bitcoin volatility has no impact at all on the darknet market volume. So it looks like the darknet market is growing even if the price is up or down. It just doesn't matter. It's a market. So how does the darknet market activity grows? Because it has grown except the last year. So in 2012, this is the total value sent to darknet markets. That's what I'm going to tell you now. 2012, 57 million. 2013, 196 million. 2014, 254 million. 2015, 357 million. 2016, 566 million, 2017, 707 million, and 2018, 603 million. So why did it go down a little bit? They say it's probably because of the shutdowns, which makes sense. However, even though the darknet market activity is growing steadily, the darknet market activity is decreasing in relation to the total cryptocurrency activity. So looks like what Andreas was saying back then, that now we are only using, there is a lot of criminals who are using it, but as more and more mainstream coming, it's less and less criminals in relation to the whole total activity. So that prediction seems to be true there. So what is the share of Bitcoin's economic value sent to darknet markets? In 2012, it was 7%. In 2016, it was less than 1%. And in 2018, it was so small, I couldn't even figure out from the chart, because the chart wasn't showing it because it was so small. So they didn't tell us what's the percentage there. Now, one interesting trend is single vendor shops are emerging because of darknet market takedowns. So that makes sense too. Privacy coins are starting to surface, mainly Monero, but very slowly, and they are kind of insignificant for now, but they are starting to be present. I'm not quite sure what that means, because they were starting to be present in 2016 or 17 when Alphabet started accepting Monero, but well, there you go, they are starting to be present. I2P and Open Bazaar are starting to gain traction too, but very, very slowly. Tor is still the king. There was a darknet market that changed from Tor to I2P, and then they shut down because they had no customers. So that was interesting. And now Bitcoin mixing. This was very interesting. So you might heard me citing something, an elliptic report previously, that 30% of all darknet market activity, darknet market users were using mixers. It looks like this 30%, at least according to Chainalysis, this 30% was true about 2014 and 15. And today, almost no darknet market users or vendors are mixing. Like, again, the chart was, the percentage was so small, and it looks like everyone is just sending directly to exchanges, which is very interesting, and mixing is decreasing. Why is that? I don't know. Maybe the darknet market users are becoming less sophisticated. That would be my only only guess there. Do you guys have any guesses that why our Bitcoin mixing is less and less used on the darknet?
Well, it could just be that, customers are using on and off ramps where mixing doesn't really matter as much. Like local Bitcoins or ATMs, like platforms that aren't going to have like as in depth of an analytics analysis.
Yes, actually, there was a quite large percentage, maybe 20 to 30%, about 20%, I can't recall, that was using peer-to-peer exchanges, and the rest was using centralized exchanges. So yeah, peer-to-peer exchanges are trending too. That's a good trend, I guess.
I also wonder if it's got something to do with the market shutdowns, because I imagine that 30%, like got affected with these market shutdowns. So I'm sure that had an effect on the amount of mixing going on.
Yeah, who knows? Anyhow, next topic about this is that stolen credit card data, they were, well, where is the stolen credit card data from? How do people actually get that data? And they were citing data breaches, hotel front desk workers, and waiters. So if you eliminate the data breaches, for example, you're not storing credit card data of your customers or just use Bitcoin, then credit card fraud is not gonna be that prominent. Next topic was child pornography, which they did not talk about much because they were, well, it's a sensitive topic, so they didn't want to talk about that, but they said a few things. One thing was, this is much smaller than anything else on the darknet. This is mainly organized crime groups, and access to these is extremely hidden. You cannot find it even on the darknet because they are hidden. This kind of activity is banned from the darknet marketplaces. So yeah, it's but it's something that they wanted to bring up, even if it's insignificant. Impact of dream market shutdown. This was a case study that what happened after they shut down dream market, because there were some interesting things. One, that they noticed it that other darknet markets were courting displaced vendors from dream market. So everyone wanted to, hey, come to my market. That's interesting. And the most who got the most customers from the market was actually Wall Street market. And the Wall Street market, what they noticed, it got shut down by law enforcement. They didn't say how, but what they said is that they noticed that Wall Street market actually started to exit scam right before the law enforcement shut down. So that's an interesting thing there. And that's about the Chainalysis report. I think it was very interesting, informative too.
So what you're saying is that Wall Street market was ran by some dirty cop who knew that the bus was coming.
I don't know, maybe. It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, I think, that's a pretty good illustration of just, the overall trends I think you'd expect. I mean, obviously, like Bitcoin demand for darknet markets is going to be very inelastic. Like there's really nothing else that you can use for that.
Yeah, I tried to act like it was very These things were not really news. The only thing that really was news for me is that mixing became much less popular. I didn't know that. Everything else is like, well, we kind of know everything, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. But, you know, that does kind of make sense, though, because, you know, if customers are just going to on-ramps where they don't really have to worry about it, like their ID isn't being tied to it, then, I mean, they don't have to care. Like, it's really only the vendors when they go to try and convert or something. And if they're using the same kind of on and off ramps, then, I mean, it's not really that important.
I'm just interested or the beginning when you were saying there's like certain exchanges that does like most of the business with these darknet markets, and you know, yeah, we're seeing all these things shut down. I mean, I guess it's safe to say that they're like working with law enforcement, these exchanges, as far as Bitstamp and Binance and these other guys.
Yes, it's fair to say they were actually talking about that it's very important for exchanges to work with law enforcement seamlessly, and not just that, but many exchanges are working with law enforcement very very helpful to law enforcement, and these exchanges I talked about BitPay, Bitstamp, Binance, Corebit. These were, there was a slide that, hey, we are proud of, these are our customers. So these are just the largest exchanges that they are most proud of. So it's not limited to these exchanges.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Guys like fucking Kraken and BitMEX, all these guys need to get together. I don't know. There just needs to be like the fact that cannabis is number one thing selling. It just makes me think it's ridiculous that all these people are basically, yeah, they're having to do something that they're not exactly familiar with and they're scared of and they could go to jail for just to get access to a friggin' plant that can help them with something, man. That's where it's like, it's an aggravating point about the whole thing where it's like, you're right. I mean, like, there are some terrible things on there, that CP stuff. And, there's like bounty hunters, all this kind of crazy stuff is available down there. But I mean, for the most part, it's like people trying to get medicine.
Rick, didn't you know that marijuana addicts are really crazed rapists with semen encrusted pants from jacking off all the time?
What?
Yeah. You get all your information from Fear and Loathing, then that's what you'd imagine.
Wait, what? What just happened?
It's a quote from Hunter Thompson.
No, no, wait. That is actually. You're right.
No, did I know the quote? Yeah. I mean, well, at least half of that quote is in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, talking about, the cannabis dopey can't find a rape victim, so they have semen stains stuck on their pants from jerking off all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
correct. That is not true. I'll tell you.
Tangent.
Let's move on to Tor.
Yeah, what's going on with Tor? Please tell me people are using Tor.
Oh my God! Bite my tongue!
Yeah. Don't worry, we're all biting our tongues. But for anyone who doesn't know, the Tor project used to only have a BitPay payment processing portal for people who wanted to donate to them with Bitcoin, which was very annoying because BitPay sucks. And I believe it was sometime in March of this year where they were supposedly moving away from BitPay and implementing a donation portal with BTC Pay Server after a lot of people complained about them using BitPay. And so recently, they've done donation campaigns before, but I believe this is the first one I've seen where they're asking for Bitcoin, and they probably wanted to spread awareness that they now accept Bitcoin through BTC Pay Server. So they did a Bitcoin for Tor donation campaign. I think it's supposed to last about 2 weeks. And they had a soft cap goal of $10,000. And as anticipated, since they're now using BTC Pay Server, which is a lot easier to use instead of BitPay, they've since surpassed the soft cap within, I think, 25 hours or something. It was only about a day. And the meter 3 days. Well, wait, did it start 3 days ago? Because I saw someone say that they reached the goal within a day. Or is that not
It's not
correct?
true. I was monitoring for like every day once or something like that. I think about 2 or 3 days, and I made the last payment that reached the goal. It
Yeah.
was Sabi.
So yeah, the meter currently sits around $16,500 when I last checked, which is from almost 400 contributors. That's an average of $40 worth of Bitcoin per person. And yes, I did see that Wasabi donated, I think it was $1,000 out of that total, somewhere around there.
Yes, it's 1,030 something. That's how much needed to reach the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just think, accepting Bitcoin and accepting Bitcoin over a payment processor that doesn't absolutely suck is long overdue. So that's, I guess, good.
I see where you get the information. Actually, it says on the website that we did it 24 hours after the launch. We managed to reach the soft cap goal, but I that's not true because I was really monitoring daily. Maybe it was 2 days, but not 24 hours. Yeah.
Whether that's good or not is highly debatable. I do not trust Tor. I just
You only trust Trump, don't you?
no, I don't trust it. I mean, like the design is it's a nice like onion routing protocol, but like it's still not completely impervious to timing attacks. And like also, you know this
because it's just a matter of, do you trust it?
No, but hold on. Let me finish though. It's like you know this, but like
that's bullshit.
no, you know this. No part. There are bugs in there. There are bad behaviors in Tor that are very conducive to things like network partition attacks. And the developers have known about those issues for forever and aren't doing anything about them. That is very fucking suspicious, man.
So one thing you certainly trust Tor with is with end-to-end encryption. You trust it with that. That's a very important thing. And now we can move on to anonymity. Do you trust it with your Bitcoin privacy against your neighbors? Yeah, sure you do. Against your government? Well, probably not, because you're American, but my government is not that literate, so I would trust it against my government. You know what I mean? It's a scale. It's doing a pretty good job on many things.
That's my point though about like I'm not going to trust it against my government because like I said that there are issues that fragment the network and prevent hidden services from being reached by huge portions of the network, and that's exactly what you need to partition the network and isolate where in the network the source of some information is. And the developers know about that and have not been prioritizing it. That is very that's suspicious as fuck.
These attacks are only possible if exit nodes are involved. I don't even know if any attack is possible if exit nodes are not involved. Probably there are, but it's like there are 99% of the attacks when you are actually trying to access the clearnet over Tor. That's the problem. If you are staying inside the anonymity network, then it's pretty fucking good.
I don't trust it. I want to see a lot better mix nuts built. I mean, like, NIM Technologies is working on one right now that would actually deal with a lot of timing attack issues and actually has some plans to deal with partition attacks. Like, I don't think this is the kind of thing in the long term that it's just like, oh, Tor is good enough. Okay. Like these things need to be airtight and government hard. Otherwise, like, what are we doing?
How I think about it is that Tor is a great general purpose anonymity network. What we need is specialization. For example, CoinShuffle, dice mix from the CoinShuffle protocol. That's a great specialization of the mixing network, anonymity network implementation applied to Bitcoin mixing. Dandelion is exactly the same, but it's applied for bit broadcasting. But even then, all these specialized networks, you hear Tim Ruffing from CoinShuffle or the Dandelion girl saying that, well, it would just be better if you would put it over
No. Like I'm not talking like we need a special mix net just for Bitcoin shit. I'm saying we need better general purpose solutions.
Yeah, I know that's what you're saying. I'm saying that's what I'm saying, that we don't need that.
Well, you do, you're wrong. Stop being an idiot.
But it's like the internet. You're not gonna replace the internet. It's like Bitcoin. You're not gonna replace Bitcoin. It's Tor. Let's live with it because it's just so much infrastructure on top of it that you can't. You have to make it better.
No.
Okay.
No. What? All right.
Should we move along?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Technology is what we need.
You know, accidentally in the digest we found a topic that I know my stuff in. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. How about that?
I believe I have the next one, right? I'm not looking at the
Yes.
schedule. So this is kind of an old story. I mean, they've tweeted about it again more recently, but Samourai Wallet released their Dojo node software back at the beginning of June, and I don't remember us covering it. So I'm just going to bring it up today since I saw it again recently. And they've since added a landing page on their website for Dojo specifically, where they talk about its features and what it's useful for. And the first one states that, Rick did.
Yeah, I think so, but that's all right. We can restate it for sure. Like, need some people to be spinning those nodes up.
Did they have a landing page for it at the time? Because that's mostly what I'm looking at. Plus,
I don't think the guide and documentation was really that fleshed out, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah, I just really covered over the blog post put out by the team.
Okay, so in that time since then, they've actually added a dedicated landing page on their website, and it goes over the features. And the first one states, Samourai Wallet is already unrivaled in transaction privacy in terms of mobile device wallets, and but the default configuration is still subject to network level privacy loss. Hosting your own dojo allows you to simply bypass our default servers and circumvent these concerns. Which, I mean, there's a bunch of other things on there, but on this point in particular, we've discussed the implications a lot in previous episodes, namely 147 and 166, and the weird kind of debate about whether or not Samourai could call itself a privacy wallet because their servers were handling address balance lookups and such. Well, that has been solved, and the silence of Joe Nishnelli is deafening. At the bottom of that landing page, Samourai also note that they will still be collaborating with Nodl to release a special hardware device for the dojo, but that has not been released yet, probably because originally I think they were working with someone else. I think it was Bitseed, and then that didn't work out. I don't remember the reason, but now they're working with Nodl, so that sounds like it'll be coming at some point in the future. I also found, when I was looking, I found a copy-paste installation guide for the dojo written by whyholdbitcoin.com, which walks you through downloading the software, setting up a Docker instance in Tor, installing the dojo on your node, and finally pairing dojo with your Samourai wallet, which I didn't check whether that last part, the pairing, is functioning yet. Because it said Samourai 1.0 had to be released, and I didn't check if they've done that. But that will be obviously very important because that's the final step in not having to use the default servers for doing balance lookups and things like that. And they also made a lot of effort to make the pairing process as easy as possible so that not only can your wallet that you use pair with that node, but you can allow other people to use it as well if they don't want to set up their own dojo. And Shinobi, you mentioned briefly before we went on air about some problems that might come up with using Docker. Do you want to briefly go over those?
Well, I mean, it's just mostly, I mean, it's not really an issue. It doesn't affect Samourai or anything at all, but it's just the extra complexity if you have any other software that talks to your node on the same machine. I think there's going to be some extra configuration and a little bit of headache to make sure that it's talking properly, because I think having to connect through the local host is going to be handled a little differently because it's isolated in its own Docker container in VM. But like I said, that's really only an issue that comes up if you're trying to point a bunch of different software at one node and you're using the Dojo Dockerized setup. But it's nothing that's impossible, and I'm sure the documentation will get sorted out eventually to kind of help walk people through that when that issue starts popping up with a few more people. Bump. But yeah, this is pretty awesome, and soon every person I know with a Bitcoin wallet is going to be hooked up to my node. And the one thing personally I'm waiting for is there are plans to integrate PSBT support with their their Sentinel watch only wallet on mobile, and that plus the ability to hook that up to Dojo will be really nice, because I can even then, like I've kind of been shilling cold card to everybody I know lately. I could even hook their Sentinel wallet up to my node and they could handle their cold storage through that with a cold card hooked up to my node, so that there is absolutely zero privacy leak. So, once these new features get rolled out in Sentinel, like it's not just like your friends or your family's hot wallet that can be set up and linked to your node. Like you can do the same thing with cold storage as well.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I am way behind, man. I need a cold card, and yeah, I need to grab a nodal and spin up this Dojo software, because yeah, this is awesome, man. I can't wait to really get back into all that. It's been so long since I've had my node now. I feel like a decade almost, but not for long. Thanks to Samourai guys and Nodal. So I'll check that stuff out soon enough. Hopefully round about next paycheck time. All right, if there's not any more of that, we can get back to some of the craziness with governments, government Bitcoin impressions.
Go for it.
All right. Stupidest organization yet. So lately, we've been hearing a lot of talk from various traditional bodies looking into the subject of cryptocurrencies, and there has been some interesting thoughts on the topic, and there has been some incredibly bad takes. Well, the IMF put out a new blog post titled "The Rise of Digital Assets." The post goes on to detail out the IMF's hot take on this decade-old technology. They've got a couple of good lines in there. I mean, like one of them is, quote, "In short, the paper argues that the two most common forms of money today will face tough competition and could even be surpassed," close quote, which was then immediately wrecked by their next sentence, quote, "Cash and bank deposits will battle with e-money, electronically stored monetary value denominated in and pegged to a common unit of account such as the euro, dollar, or renminbi, or a basket thereof," close quote. Yeah, so the post seems like another reactionary statement from the Facebook Libra launch, but instead of arguing against Facebook controlling the monetary policy, this post seems to suggest that this will be the norm in the coming years as big tech takes over banking. It's weird to hear the IMF take that position of having no power over this situation, but they have a silver lining suggesting they can benefit from this rapid transformation. And in order to do that, the IMF attempts to categorize and label all the different forms of e-money in this post. Quote, the goal of this paper is to offer a conceptual framework to categorize new digital monies, identify some of their risk, think through the implications, and offer some policy options for central banks to consider, close quote. And in this attempt, they have detailed explanations that run into nonsense theory of the way these new systems will be built and used. They even have some pretty egregious graphics in here that show what is decentralized and what isn't based off of their highlighted attributes. If you guys are following along in the show notes, I'm talking about the money tree diagram on the 3rd page. Anyway, they break down the currency into 5 separate categories, those being B money, E money, I money, central bank money, and cryptocurrencies. So B money is traditional banking. E money is apps like WeChat and Venmo, but also stable coins. Then I money, or investment money, is for gold coins and possibly Libra. I mean, seriously, they put a question mark after Libra like they're asking. Okay, so they have B money for traditional banking, and then they have the category of central banking money, which seems like they should be the same category, but they added a central bank digital currency to that category. And lastly, they have cryptocurrency, which is pretty obvious from this post. They have no idea what they're talking about. This is where it feels like the IMF is wasting everyone's time and trying to find a way to outmaneuver this system. They can't even properly categorize the different forms of money, so it just seems like nonsense trying to listen to these arguments as to how it should be regulated. I really think I'm a little more stupid after reading this post, but yeah, overall, I feel like it's more trying to support the idea of a Libra currency and other currencies controlled by central banks, and not really trying to dig into much of like technically what is money. So yeah, did you guys have the chance to sort of glance over this post or got any comment on it?
Well, I didn't really have a chance to read it, but kind of glancing through a few of the tables and listening to what you said, I mean, I can definitely see some issues and miscategorizations, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that they weren't trying to accurately categorize things. I mean, I think this is really like an honest attempt to really just create a classification system and look at how things could evolve and change in the future. I mean, and it's, like I said, like this is kind of like going back to what I was saying about Powell's comments. Like it's really it's strange seeing some of the conflicting, messages on these things. You have some of these major financial institutions and figures in them like releasing documents like this or making comments like Bitcoin becoming widely adopted and used is a very real possibility. And then you have like the reactionary backlash stuff like Trump. It's like I really think a lot of the people in these bureaucracies are it's really starting to click in their head that there's nothing they can really do to stop this transformation on a macro scale. Like it's just going to happen.
I can agree that like maybe they're categorizing it to try and play this thing out in a gaming way, but I mean, like, to me, looking at the whole Libra mechanics of things, like that is what they want. I mean, like that is a central bank currency. Like it seems like, when Christine Lindegrad was there at the IMF, I mean, she was always talking about their special drawing right and like their, the idea of creating a central bank digital currency. And it just seems like Libra is kind of a match for them on that. And that's where, I mean, like they're attempting to categorize it, but I mean, yeah, the way that I'm looking at it, it just seems like, why did you put this Libra thing in the category outside of stable coins? Why did you put, like a central banking category outside of a traditional category? Like, I mean, I guess they're attempting to figure it out. But yeah, as far as like a post on this, man, they probably should have thought about it some more. I don't know. I mean, to me, it looks kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just really inescapable at this point, though, that things are going to start rapidly changing. And, a lot of these tech companies offering these kinds of services, like I think that it's inevitable. And this is kind of why You know, when I was talking about that bill banning tech companies from being financial providers earlier, like it's I think it's going a little too far because I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if big platforms like offer services built around Bitcoin or like actual like decentralized things that those platforms don't have total control over. And it's inevitable. And I mean it's been something happening since before cryptocurrencies even existed. It's just like that's been the catalyst to really start pushing it forward faster.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what goes on with the IMF, man. I mean, like we're saying earlier, all this stuff is getting pushed into a corner and everybody's taking a position. And yeah, they better have some things figured out because, these sort of systems putting them on the chopping block.
All right, let's move on to the final thoughts about that. And with
Right.
that,
Well, hold on. Janine actually had one
Final
thing she
thought.
wanted to go.
That's a final thought.
Yeah, this is the final thought, right?
Yeah, it's a final thought.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah, so if anyone hasn't heard, I mean, I've been kind of waiting a few days to say anything about this because it was kind of uncertain whether it was a good idea to talk about it. But basically on the 12th, if anyone knows the account Real Sexy Cyborg / Naomi Wu, she's a maker from China, and she's been dealing with a lot of issues over the past year and a half or so, especially with being able to fund her work because of the way she was treated by Vice magazine, which was really awful. If you want to learn more about that, she's written some Medium posts detailing what happened, and I also wrote about it in one of my, I think it was like 2 or 3 blog posts ago. And so what happened on the 12th is that her account basically posted a picture of her sitting in what looks like a police van. And it looks like basically she was arrested or taken in or something, and someone else was given permission to post from her account. But that picture was actually deleted really quickly, probably because they thought it might actually make the situation worse. So not sure exactly what happened or why she was taken in, but she's reportedly now back home, but she's not talking about what happened. So I just wanted to share that because I think people should be aware that, this is something that she was warning about for a very long time, that there would be consequences for the way that Vice treated her and what they wrote about her very irresponsibly. I think that was a year and a half ago now. And she ended up being completely right, even though they were constantly downplaying the risks that she would face as a person in China, and also doing what she does. So, yeah, it's really unfortunate, and I'm sad to hear about it. And also makes me angry that the things that she feared, it appeared to have come true as a result of the controversy with Vice. So that's pretty bad.
What the people say who think Sexy Cyborg is a persona is that there was a Reddit account way back then, before Sexy Cyborg appeared, who ended up being Sexy Cyborg's boyfriend. And that's the theory, that she actually, the posts were made by his boyfriend in his name. Yeah, and I think we shouldn't just throw it out, because this is quite suspicious that his boyfriend disappeared from Reddit and then they were trying to hide the connection as they can. But Yeah. Anyway, so I
I
don't.
mean, but that's irrelevant to this
the-
because
the- why
she wouldn't get arrested for having a boyfriend. So I don't see why that's relevant. And also, that was one of the points that, like, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, whether it's her doing all of the technical work or someone else, she creates great content and it's inspired a lot of people. So I think that's irrelevant to whether we should care about her getting arrested.
that was relevant for your Vice story because not saying it's a conspiracy that she got arrested because of Vice, but the truth is that we have no idea what happened now. And the why story is she got the platform because she was doxing people. And I'm
Yeah,
not
she shared the address of one of the journalists who wrote about her because she was, as far as she claims, she was fearing for her own life and she wanted something as a way to make them stop talking about her or writing about her in that way. And whether you agree with that or not, that doesn't justify what Vice did because the circumstances under which she agreed to do an interview with them were not circumstances that they followed through on. So I really just, I don't care who is doing the technical work at all because she's the one who is on camera. She's putting out the content, and whether or not, like, I don't know her personally, but like, seriously, that's irrelevant to the kind of issues that people face in China. And I don't want to make light of that or distract from that by talking about those theories on Reddit.
I agree with you in that sense that it doesn't matter if she was a personal or not because she learned this stuff already. It's already years later, so she definitely knows her stuff now. I'm just saying that the thing that happened in the past is not that one-sided. Yeah.
Well, so it kind of is because if you look at, I mean, I don't think she was the one who wrote the article, but Sarah Zhang was heavily involved in the commentary around that piece, and she has a history of doxing people and celebrating the doxing of people, including Dorian Nakamoto. So I don't give her much credibility in terms of whether we should side with their perspective on what happened. Like, I really don't think that they're credible in that area.
I've read that article and I think it wasn't her. I think it was a man. But anyhow, and the article wasn't that bad as she was trying to say it. It was quiet. Didn't even go into the deep and the conspiracy theory that was on other places on the internet. So,
it was bad in the sense that when she agreed to do an interview with Vice, she explicitly said, do not talk about my sexuality or my personal relationships. Like, she didn't even want it to be a topic, and yet they still asked about it and included it in the article, which was a violation of the conditions that they agreed to. So that's their fault. That's on them.
yeah, that's true.
Alrighty, Rick.
Yeah, got a kind of relevant final thought in all this with journalism and free speech, and something that we've talked about a few times about the Blockstream satellite being used for that sort of thing. And I was digging through the news and everything and ran across this guy, Safety First, on Twitter, and kind of took the initiative with that and started running with it. And, you know, he's doing a, every now and again, like it looks like once a week, he sends out these immutable news transmissions where he takes the news for the day, not necessarily Bitcoin, just important news, and, sends it up through the satellite, and, it comes back down through the feed. And that way we have some sort of immutable news source coming through the airwaves. And I mean, that's something that's pretty revolutionary. And I'm glad somebody is, taking that initiative to move forward with it. And just saw not that many followers and everything, and so just wanted to point some light on that and what he's doing, and hopefully things will keep working out successfully there.
All right. My final thought is that if you are somewhat busy person and can't sit through this whole blog digest thing, then consider checking out the blog digest testnet. It's also a YouTube channel where we cut down to the meat of the conversations and maybe if you have less time, then you would enjoy that channel more. And this is a test net, right? A Block Digest test net. That's how you go, go on the YouTube search. So it's a test net. So if it doesn't get too much, if it doesn't get traction, then we might consider stop doing that. But yeah, definitely go and check out Block Digest testnet.
You can also find it on the main digest channel. If you look in the channels section, there's a link to it. But I guess on that note, my final thought is going to be a Adult Swim type bump that I've been obsessively making a bunch of for the testnet. And since I don't think we'll ever get a story that this is relevant to, I'm just going to play this one here. So adios, everybody. We'll play this and then see you next week.
Later, everyone.
Bye.
All right, Janine, get your buy-in and then mute the mic.
Bye.
All righty. The show is starting, folks.